With the family farm 3 months from foreclosure and not a drop of water left in sight, Emma Walker makes one desperate final attempt to revive her grandfather's abandoned well. Surrounded by cracked earth and dying crops, she digs deeper than anyone before her, not knowing that 30 feet below the dusty surface lies not water, but the magnificent domed ceiling of an ancient underground city, one that could rewrite history books and be worth millions in archaeological value. As her pickaxe breaks through the stone barrier that's hidden this secret for centuries, Emma uncovers not just a lost civilization, but evidence of a historical conspiracy that has shaped Clearwater Valley's most influential family for generations. As respected archaeologist Dr. Rivera helps authenticate her discovery, Emma finds herself caught in an impossible choice. Accept the immediate financial salvation that would save her family's legacy, or expose a hidden chapter of American history that powerful forces have worked for over a century to keep buried. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The barren landscape of what was once Willow Creek Farm stretched out before Emma Walker like a betrayal. Fields that should have been lush with corn and soybeans had transformed into a patchwork of dusty brown under the relentless sun. 6 months without significant rainfall had turned the fertile black soil her grandfather had cherished into something that more closely resembled desert hardpan. Emma stood at the edge of the main field, her weathered boots coated with the fine powder that rose with each step. At 36, the lines around her eyes had deepened over the past year, not just from squinting into the harsh sunlight, but from the constant worry of watching 3 generations of farming heritage slip through her fingers. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, streaks of premature gray, the only vanity she couldn't afford to address these days. "We're running out of options, Rex," she sighed to the German Shepherd mix, who stood faithfully by her side, his tongue lolling in the 100-degree heat. The dog pressed against her leg as if offering comfort, his own ribs more visible than they should have been. Even with careful rationing of their remaining resources, everyone on the farm, human and animal alike, was feeling the strain. The drought that had gripped Clearwater County was the worst in recorded history. Emma had watched neighboring farms falter one by one, their owners accepting buyout offers from Westridge Agricultural Enterprises, the corporate giant that had been systematically acquiring family farms throughout the valley. Her grandfather, Jack Walker, had often said the soil held more value than gold, a sentiment that felt like bitter irony now as Emma contemplated the foreclosure notice sitting on her kitchen table. 3 months. That's all the time she had left before the bank would claim the land that had been in her family since 1889. Emma turned toward the old farmhouse, its white paint peeling in the heat. On the wraparound porch, her grandmother's rocking chair sat empty, a reminder of all she had already lost. Catherine Walker had passed the previous winter, taking with her a lifetime of farming wisdom and the unconditional support that had kept Emma going after her parents' accident. Now it was just Emma, Rex, and the slowly dying farm. "Come on, boy," she said, her voice finding a hint of resolve. "Let's check the maps again." In her grandfather's study, unchanged since his death 15 years earlier, Emma spread out the hand-drawn farm plans on the massive oak desk. Jack Walker had been something of an anomaly among local farmers, having earned a geology degree. Before returning to take over the family business, his meticulous documentation of the land's features had always seemed excessive to Emma as a child, but now she scoured these materials with desperate hope. For weeks, she'd been looking for anything that might help. A forgotten irrigation line, a spring not marked on county records, any resource that might save her crops and livestock. But today, she focused on the oldest map in the collection, dated 1889, when her great-grandfather first claimed this land. Something Jack had mentioned once about the original water source for the farm had been nagging at her memory. Her finger traced the faded lines until she found it. A notation near the eastern boundary marked primary well. The accompanying notes, written in her great-grandfather's precise handwriting, mentioned exceptional flow and unusual cool temperature even in summer months. This well had apparently been the farm's main water source for nearly 60 years, before her grandfather had switched to more modern irrigation systems connected to the county water table, a table that now lay almost completely dry. According to the map, the old well was located about a quarter-mile from the house, in an area that had become overgrown with scrub brush over the decades. Emma had passed it hundreds of times in her life without giving it much thought. Just an abandoned stone circle, partially covered by wooden planks now warped with age. But something in her great-grandfather's notes caught her attention. Depth reached 27 feet. Advised against further excavation due to unusual stone formation. And in the margin, added in a different pen, as if an afterthought, Holloway's interest in eastern boundary suspicious. Offered triple market value. Declined. Emma sat back in her grandfather's creaking chair, her mind racing. Holloway, the family name that had evolved into the current Holloway Westridge corporate empire, the very same people trying to buy her out now. And they'd been interested in this specific part of the farm even back in 1889. That couldn't be coincidence. The abandoned well suddenly represented both mystery and hope. If it had once provided abundant water, perhaps it could again. The current groundwater surveys showed nothing promising in that area, but they only measured to modern drilling depths. What if there was something deeper, something that only the old-fashioned well could access? Rex whined softly, sensing the shift in Emma's demeanor. She reached down to scratch behind his ears, her decision already made. Worth a try, isn't it, boy? Not like we have anything to lose at this point. The next morning dawned mercilessly hot, the thermometer outside the kitchen window reading 93 degrees before 7 a.m. Emma loaded her pickup with tools, shovels, pickaxes, rope, a battery-powered lamp, and the small generator-run winch her father had used for fence posts. She'd spent half the night reading her grandfather's old geology books, refreshing her memory on well construction and underground water movement. The drive to the eastern boundary took only minutes. Emma parked as close as she could to the site marked on the map, then made her way through the brittle brush, Rex trotting ahead as if he understood their mission. When they reached the old well, Emma found it in worse condition than she'd remembered. Vines had grown through the gaps in the covering planks, and small animals had clearly been using it as shelter. The stone circle itself, however, remained remarkably intact, a testament to her great-grandfather's masonry skills. First things first, Emma muttered to herself, pulling on work gloves and beginning to clear away the debris. The physical labor felt good. A concrete problem with a straightforward solution, unlike the complex financial disaster threatening everything she loved. By mid-morning, she had cleared the well opening completely, revealing a perfect circle of fitted fieldstone, about 4 feet in diameter. Securing a rope to the sturdy oak nearby, Emma lowered the battery lamp into the depths. The stone walls continued down farther than she could see, disappearing into darkness below. The air that rose from the opening felt noticeably cooler, a good sign that it might connect to groundwater. Encouraged, Emma set up the winch system with a makeshift bosun's chair, essentially a board attached to the cable that would allow her to descend safely. After double-checking all connections and leaving Rex with strict instructions to stay, she began lowering herself into the well. The temperature dropped immediately as she descended past the sun-baked surface. The stone walls were remarkable. Each rock fitted perfectly to its neighbors without mortar, creating a structure that had withstood over a century of seasonal changes. Emma ran her hand along them in appreciation as she continued downward, counting the feet as she went. At 20 feet, the character of the well changed subtly. The stones seemed older somehow, with a different cutting pattern than those above. Emma paused, shining her headlamp more carefully on the walls. These stones weren't just fitted, they were precisely cut to uniform sizes, with far more skill than would have been common for frontier construction. "Strange," she whispered, her voice echoing slightly in the enclosed space. At 27 feet, exactly the depth recorded in her great-grandfather's notes, Emma reached what appeared to be the bottom of the well. But unlike the mud or sand she expected, she found herself standing on what appeared to be a large, flat stone slab. The floor of the well wasn't natural at all. It was deliberately constructed and surprisingly dry. Her headlamp revealed an unusual, circular pattern etched into the stone, concentric rings surrounding what might have been symbols or writing, now too worn to decipher. This was clearly what her great-grandfather had described as the unusual stone formation. But why would he have stopped digging if there was no water? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And why would this have prompted interest from the Holloways? Emma knelt to examine the slab more closely. Around its perimeter, she noticed a thin gap where it met the well walls. Not the tight fit of the stones above, but a deliberate space. She took the pickaxe she'd brought down with her and carefully wedged it into this gap, using it as a lever. To her surprise, the slab moved slightly. It wasn't a natural formation at all, but some kind of cap or covering. With renewed energy, Emma worked the pickaxe around the perimeter, gradually loosening whatever ancient mechanisms might have held it in place. After nearly an hour of cautious effort, the stone slab shifted enough for Emma to peer beneath it. Instead of soil or even a water pocket, her headlamp illuminated an open space below, a chamber of some kind, its floor at least 10 feet down from where she knelt. "What on earth?" Emma breathed, her voice carrying into the space below and returning with a distinctly artificial echo. This was no natural formation. This was something built. Adjusting her position, Emma worked the stone slab further aside until she created an opening large enough to lower herself through. She hesitated only briefly. Whatever lay below had been sealed for a reason. But curiosity and the desperate need for any kind of solution pushed her forward. Securing her rope to the well wall, she lowered herself into the darkness. Her boots touched down on a floor that, even through the thick rubber soles, she could tell was perfectly flat and smooth. As Emma stood and swept her headlamp around, the breath caught in her throat. She wasn't standing in a simple chamber or cavern. She was standing in what appeared to be a street. Stretching before her in both directions was a perfectly straight path, about 8 feet wide, flanked on both sides by what could only be doorways, rectangular openings cut into walls of the same precision-cut stone as the cap she'd just removed. Some were small, like the entrance to a home, while others were larger, as if designed for public gatherings. The ceiling arched above at about 12 feet, supported by columns placed at regular intervals, all carved from the same pale limestone. Emma stood frozen, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. This wasn't some small underground shelter or storage area. This was an entire underground complex, a city built with extraordinary precision and completely hidden beneath. Her family's farm for generations. As she moved cautiously forward, her headlamp revealed more details. On the walls between doorways were carvings, intricate designs showing people, animals, and symbols that resembled no writing system she recognized. The craftsmanship was exquisite, with details preserved as if they had been carved yesterday, rather than what must have been centuries or even millennia ago. A cold realization washed over Emma. This wasn't just an archaeological find, this was a world-changing discovery. An entire underground city, previously undocumented, beneath American farmland. It would rewrite history books, attract international attention, and, her practical mind couldn't help calculating, be worth millions in archaeological value. And the Holloways had known, or at least suspected, its existence since 1889. That's why they'd offered triple market value for this specific section of land. That's why Westridge Agricultural Enterprises was so determined to acquire her farm now, even as they let other, more productive properties go to auction. Emma's hand shook slightly as she raised her phone to take photos, relieved to find she still had battery life, even if there was no signal this far underground. She documented everything she could see from her position, unwilling to venture too far into the complex alone during this first exploration. After about 20 minutes, the magnitude of her discovery beginning to settle in, Emma made her way back to the opening and climbed up to the well shaft. The ascent seemed to take far longer than the descent, her mind racing with implications and possibilities. When she finally emerged into the punishing sunlight, Rex greeted her with anxious whines, sensing her agitation. Emma sat on the edge of the well, dust-covered and trembling slightly from adrenaline, trying to sort through her chaotic thoughts. She had discovered something extraordinary, something that could save her farm financially many times over if handled correctly. But she'd studied enough history to know that such discoveries were often taken from the landowners through legal manipulations, especially when powerful interests became involved. And the Holloways were certainly that. The family controlled everything from the county water board to the state historical commission. Emma needed documentation, expert verification, and legal protection before going public. She needed an ally who understood both the archaeological significance and the likely legal battles ahead, someone not connected to local interests or intimidated by corporate power. Back at the farmhouse, Emma secured the well site as best she could, covering the opening with a new plywood sheet weighted down with stones. In her grandfather's study, she began researching archaeologists specializing in pre-Columbian North American civilizations, looking specifically for those with a track record of protecting landowner rights. One name appeared repeatedly in academic journals and news articles: Dr. Lucas Rivera, Associate Professor of Archaeology at the State University, known for both his groundbreaking work on underground structures in the American Southwest and his active opposition to corporate acquisition of historically significant sites. More importantly, several articles mentioned his successful court testimony that had helped small landowners retain rights to discoveries on their properties. Emma drafted a careful email, including a few of her photos, but withholding specific location details. She explained her situation in broad terms, emphasizing the immediate threat of corporate acquisition and the need for confidential expert assessment. To her surprise, Dr. Rivera responded within hours. "Ms. Walker, your discovery appears extraordinary, based on the limited images provided. The construction techniques and symbolic carvings are inconsistent with any documented culture in your region, suggesting a previously unknown civilization with advanced architectural knowledge. I take very seriously both the archaeological implications and your concerns about property rights. I happen to be finishing fieldwork only 3 hours from your location and could arrange a site visit tomorrow if that suits your timeline. This would be strictly confidential until we determine the best approach for documentation and protection. Regarding your financial concerns, discoveries of this magnitude typically qualify for emergency heritage preservation funding that could address your immediate needs, while longer-term arrangements are established." Dr. Lucas Rivera, Emma read the email 3 times, relief washing over her. For the first time in months, she felt something like hope, not just for saving the farm, but for understanding the mystery that had apparently been lying beneath her family's land for generations. She was composing her reply when the sound of a vehicle on the gravel driveway pulled her attention away from the computer. Looking out the window, she recognized the sleek black SUV with the Westridge Agricultural logo on the door. Samantha. Holloway Reed, the company's senior acquisition specialist and direct descendant of the Holloway who had first approached her great-grandfather, was making another unscheduled visit. Emma quickly closed her laptop and took a deep breath, mentally rehearsing the same refusal she'd given during Samantha's previous visits. But as Rex barked his usual greeting-warning hybrid at the approaching vehicle, Emma realized her situation had fundamentally changed since yesterday. She now understood exactly why the Holloways wanted this land and had for over a century, and that knowledge gave her power she hadn't possessed during any of their previous encounters. Samantha emerged from the SUV looking impeccable despite the heat. Crisp linen pantsuit, not a strand of blonde hair out of place, designer sunglasses hiding eyes that Emma knew were calculating the value of everything they saw. At 42, Samantha had perfected the balance between corporate efficiency and personal charm, a combination that had convinced dozens of struggling farmers to sell over the past 5 years. "Emma," she called warmly, as if they were old friends, rather than adversaries in an increasingly tense negotiation. "I was in the area and thought I'd stop by. How are you holding up in this heat?" "Managing," Emma replied, stepping onto the porch, but not inviting her visitor inside. Rex took position at her side, watching Samantha with the wariness he reserved for anyone associated with Westridge. "What brings you out again so soon? Our last conversation was pretty definitive." Samantha removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes that held something Emma hadn't seen before. Urgency. Samantha took a step closer, maintaining her practiced smile, even as her eyes darted briefly toward the eastern property line where the old well was located. "The board has authorized me to increase our offer by 20%. That's nearly double what the county assessor values your property at, Emma. Given the current state of your crops and the foreclosure timeline, I think we both know it's more than fair." Emma felt her heart rate quicken. Had they somehow learned about her discovery already? Was she being watched? She kept her expression neutral, channeling the poker face her father had taught her for farm equipment auctions. "That's generous, but my answer hasn't changed. This land isn't for sale." "Emma?" Samantha's voice took on a note of condescension thinly veiled as concern. "I understand emotional attachment truly, but you're facing foreclosure in less than 90 days. Your irrigation system is condemned. The soil moisture readings from the county survey show no chance of salvaging this season's crops." She gestured toward the barren fields. "What exactly are you holding on to?" "Family history," Emma replied, the words carrying new weight given what she'd discovered hours earlier. 4 generations of walkers have worked this land. That means something to me." Samantha sighed, clearly having expected this response. "I respect that connection, but sentiment doesn't pay bank loans. Our offer comes with relocation assistance and first right of refusal on 5 acres if you want to build a new home in the area. We'd even incorporate the Walker name into whatever development eventually goes in here." Emma almost laughed at the transparency of it all. The Holloways weren't interested in farming. They wanted what lay beneath the surface. "I appreciate you coming out in this heat, Samantha, but my decision is final. If Westridge is still interested after I resolve my current challenges, we can talk again." Something flickered behind Samantha's professional veneer, frustration, perhaps even anger, before she smoothly returned to her composed demeanor. "Just so you're fully informed, the county board is voting next week on emergency water rationing measures. If passed, properties with condemned wells would be barred from drilling new ones without environmental impact studies that take months to complete. That timeline would put you well past your foreclosure date." The thinly veiled threat confirmed Emma's suspicions about Westridge's influence with local officials. "Interesting timing," she observed, keeping her tone neutral. "I'll be sure to attend that meeting." "Always the fighter," Samantha said with a tight smile as she replaced her sunglasses. "The offer remains open for 72 hours, Emma. After that, we'll be allocating those funds to other acquisitions." She handed over a sealed envelope before turning back toward her vehicle. "Think of your future, not just your past." Emma watched the SUV disappear down the dusty driveway, the envelope unopened in her hand. Rex whined softly beside her, picking up on her tension. "It's okay, boy," she murmured, scratching behind his ears. "They've wanted what's under this farm for 130 years. They can wait a few more days." Inside, Emma returned to her computer, quickly confirming her meeting with Dr. Rivera for the following morning. Then she turned her attention to her great-grandfather's journals, searching for any additional information about the well or the Holloway's early interest in the property. In a leather-bound volume dated 1890, she found what she was looking for: entries that had seemed unremarkable before, but now carried profound significance. April 17th, 1890. Holloway approached again with increased offer for East Section. When refused, suggested county might reassess water rights in the Valley. Mentioned historical precedent for limiting private claims on resources of significant public interest. His meaning unclear, but tone threatening. May 3rd, 1890. Strange men observed taking measurements near the old well while I was in town. Confronted them upon return. They claimed to be county surveyors, but fled when questioned about official documentation. Covered the well opening more securely afterward. June 22nd, 1890. Judge Browning, Holloway's brother-in-law, issued ruling restricting well digging below 30 feet due to aquifer concerns. Applies only to East Valley properties. Convenient timing, as I had planned to expand the well next month. Must find alternative water source. Emma sat back, pieces falling into place. Her great-grandfather hadn't abandoned the well because it dried up. He'd been legally prevented from digging deeper by Holloway-influenced regulations. Regulations suspiciously similar to the ones Samantha had just mentioned were being reintroduced next week. The pattern was unmistakable. The Holloways had been trying to gain control of the underground city for generations, using their growing influence to prevent landowners from discovering it, while attempting to acquire the properties through seemingly generous offers. Emma glanced at her phone, confirming that Dr. Rivera would arrive by 9 the next morning. She needed to prepare the site for his inspection while keeping it hidden from prying eyes, especially any drones or surveillance Westridge might employ. The remainder of the day passed in careful preparation. Emma gathered all the family documents related to the property, organized her initial photographs of the underground structure, and assembled the surveying equipment her grandfather had left behind. She also made a quick trip into town for additional supplies, fresh batteries for the lamps, a better camera, and a portable air quality monitor she borrowed from her friend at the local fire station. That evening, Emma returned to the well site with canvas tarps and PVC piping, constructing what appeared to be a makeshift irrigation repair station around the opening. To anyone observing from a distance, it would look like she was addressing her water problems, a logical activity given her situation. In reality, it provided cover for her real project while explaining any coming and going from the area. A sunset painted the drought-stricken landscape in ironically beautiful hues of orange and gold. Emma sat on her porch with her grandfather's journal open in her lap. The enormity of her discovery was still sinking in. Beneath her failing farm lay a potentially world-changing archaeological site, one that might save her financially while simultaneously rewriting the history of North American civilization. But mixed with the excitement was a growing sense of responsibility. Whatever Culture had built that underground city deserved respect and proper scientific documentation, not exploitation or secrecy. Yet the Holloways had apparently been willing to keep it hidden for generations, simply to maintain control of whatever value it represented. Emma's phone chimed with a text message from Dr. Rivera. Arriving 9 a.m., bringing specialized imaging, equipment and legal documents regarding landowner rights to archaeological discoveries. Get rest if you can. Rest, however, proved elusive. Emma spent most of the night reviewing property maps and water rights documents, searching for any legal vulnerabilities the Holloways might exploit. By dawn, she had compiled a substantial file of evidence showing the systematic pattern of interest in her property's eastern section dating back to her great-grandfather's time. Dr. Lucas Rivera arrived promptly at 9 in a mud-splattered jeep that had clearly seen its share of archaeological expeditions. He was younger than Emma had expected from his academic credentials, early 40s perhaps, with salt and pepper hair and the weathered complexion of someone who spent more time at dig sites than behind a desk. He wore practical field clothes and carried himself with the quiet confidence of an expert who had nothing to prove. "Miss Walker," he greeted her, extending a hand calloused from fieldwork. "Thank you for contacting me. Based on your photographs, you may have made one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in North American history." "Emma, please," she replied, finding his straightforward manner reassuring. "And I hope you understand why I was cautious about sharing location details. The situation is complicated." Dr. Rivera nodded, his expression serious. "Corporate interest in archaeological sites usually is. I've brought documentation of relevant precedents protecting landowner rights in similar cases." He gestured to his jeep, where equipment cases were visible. "But first, I'd like to see what we're dealing with, if that's all right with you." As they walked toward the disguised well site, Emma explained her family's history with the property, the current financial crisis, and the generations of Holloway interest. Dr. Rivera listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions that revealed his familiarity with the intersection of archaeology and property rights. "The pattern you're describing is unfortunately common," he said as they approached the well. "Powerful interests learn of potential archaeological significance, then use various legal and financial pressures to gain control before the discovery becomes public knowledge. Once they own the property, they can control access, narrative, and any potential commercial applications." "Like tourism?" Emma asked, beginning to remove the tarps covering the well opening. Dr. Rivera's expression darkened. "Tourism is just the beginning. Depending on what's down there, the applications could include everything from film rights to intellectual property claims on any discovered technologies or artistic methods. The Antiquities Act provides some protections, but private property discoveries exist in a gray area that corporations are well equipped to exploit." The concern in his voice confirmed Emma's decision to seek expert help before approaching authorities. Together, they prepared the well for descent, Dr. Rivera examining the stone construction with professional appreciation. "Extraordinary masonry," he murmured, running his hand along the fitted stones. "This upper section shows 19th century techniques, but these lower courses." He pointed to the transition point Emma had noticed. "These are much older and show remarkably different craftsmanship." Once the safety lines and lighting were secured, Dr. Rivera insisted on making the first descent. "Standard archaeological protocol," he explained. "I need to assess structural stability and air quality before you re-enter. Your safety comes first." Emma agreed reluctantly, watching as he disappeared into the darkness below. 10 minutes later, his voice crackled over the two-way radio she'd provided. "Emma, you need to see this. It's safe to descend, and bring the camera, all of it." When Emma reached the bottom of the well and stepped through the opening in the stone slab, she found Dr. Rivera standing motionless in the underground street, his headlamp illuminating what appeared to be a large central chamber connecting multiple pathways. His expression combined professional assessment with undisguised awe. "This," he said quietly as she joined him, "is unlike anything documented in North American archaeology. The construction techniques, the scale, the preservation quality, it simply doesn't match any known indigenous architectural tradition." Together, they moved carefully through the main pathway, Dr. Rivera photographing and measuring everything while dictating observations into a small recorder. The underground complex expanded beyond Emma's initial discovery, revealing a network of chambers, corridors, and what appeared to be living spaces, all constructed from the same precisely cut limestone. Most remarkable were the wall carvings, intricate scenes depicting daily life, ceremonial activities, and astronomical observations. Dr. Rivera spent considerable time documenting these, his excitement growing with each new panel. "These symbols," he said, pointing to recurring patterns among the carvings, "they're not consistent with any documented writing system from pre-Columbian America, yet they're clearly systematic, organized, repeated, contextual. This is a fully developed written language we've never encountered before." After nearly 3 hours of careful exploration and documentation, they returned to the surface. Dr. Rivera immediately transferred his photos and recordings to his laptop, creating backup copies while the information remained fresh. "Emma," he said finally, looking up from his computer, "I need to be absolutely clear about what we're dealing with. This discovery would fundamentally change our understanding of pre-Columbian civilization in North America. The complexity of construction, the writing system, the evidence of long-term underground habitation, none of this fits current archaeological models." "What does that mean practically?" Emma asked, trying to process the implications. "It means this site would immediately become one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in American history. It would attract international attention, research funding, and yes, tourism eventually, if properly developed." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "It also means extremely powerful interests will attempt to gain control of it, through legal means if possible, through less ethical channels if necessary. Like the Holloways have been trying to do for generations," Emma observed. "Exactly." Dr. Rivera reached into his bag and pulled out a folder of legal documents, "which is why I brought these. Before we proceed with any official notification, we need to establish your rights as the property owner. These papers will help secure your legal position while we develop a protection strategy." The documents outlined a complex but comprehensive approach, establishing a heritage trust for the property, filing for emergency historical designation, and creating a formal academic partnership that would protect both the site's scientific integrity and Emma's financial interests. "The trust structure is particularly important," Dr. Rivera explained. "It ensures that even if financial pressures force a property transfer, the archaeological site remains protected and accessible for research. It also creates opportunities for grants and preservation funding that could address your immediate financial concerns." Emma studied the papers carefully, relieved to find they included provisions for continued agricultural use of the surface land. "This would let me keep farming while the archaeological work proceeds underneath?" "That's the intention," Dr. Rivera confirmed. "The best archaeological preservation occurs when local stakeholders remain invested in the land. Your family's connection to this property is an asset, not an obstacle." As they finalized the preliminary paperwork, Emma's phone chimed with an incoming text. It was from her neighbor, Tyler Johnson. "Westridge Surveyors at County Office requesting property line verification for your east boundary. Said something about water rights assessment. Thought you should know." Emma showed the message to Dr. Rivera, whose expression tightened. "They're moving faster than I expected. We should accelerate our timeline. Are you comfortable with me filing these initial protections today, before I leave?" "Absolutely," Emma agreed, signing where indicated. "How quickly will they take effect?" "The emergency historical designation can be processed within 24 to 48 hours once I submit the preliminary documentation. It's temporary, 120 days, but provides immediate protection against development while permanent status is considered." He gathered the signed papers efficiently. "I'll submit everything electronically from my laptop using the satellite connection, in my Jeep. The sooner we establish an official record, the better." While Dr. Rivera prepared the filings, Emma returned to the farmhouse to retrieve her great-grandfather's journals. The historical record of Holloway interest would strengthen their case for emergency protection. As she collected the relevant volumes, she noticed a dust-covered box on the top shelf of the study closet, one she didn't recognize from her previous searching. Inside, she found survey maps, even older than those she'd been reviewing, along with a sealed envelope addressed in her grandfather's handwriting, to be opened only if the well reveals its secret. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she broke the seal. The letter inside, dated just weeks before her grandfather's death, was brief but staggering. "To my heir, if you're reading this, you've discovered what lies beneath the East Field. The underground city has remained our family's secret for 3 generations, not by choice, but by necessity. Your great-grandfather found it while searching for water, just as you likely have during another drought cycle. The Holloways learned of it through a worker who glimpsed the chamber before your great-grandfather sealed it. They've sought control ever since, using their influence to prevent official discovery while attempting to acquire our land. Your grandmother and I decided to protect the site by sealing the well completely and diverting attention to other water sources. I've left complete documentation with Attorney James Harrington in a sealed file. The combination to access it is your grandmother's birthday followed by mine. Use this information wisely. The history beneath our land doesn't belong to us or to the Holloways. It belongs to humanity. With love and faith in your judgment, Grandpa Jack." Emma read the letter twice, then carefully placed it in the folder with the trust documents. Her grandfather had known all along, had been protecting the site while presenting himself as nothing more than a practical farmer. The revelation added another layer to her family's connection to this land and strengthened her resolve to handle the discovery responsibly. When she returned to Dr. Rivera with the letter and additional documentation, he reviewed everything carefully before incorporating the new information into his filings. "This letter is significant," he noted. "It establishes historical knowledge and protective intent across multiple generations of your family. That strengthens both the legal case for your continued stewardship and the ethical argument against corporate acquisition." By late afternoon, the initial protection filings were complete. Dr. Rivera had submitted extensive documentation to the State Historical Preservation Office, the anthropology department at his university, and a trusted colleague at the National Museum of Natural History, creating multiple official records of the discovery, with timestamps that predated any potential Westridge claims. "What happens now?" Emma asked as they stood by his Jeep. The day's work completed, but the journey clearly just beginning. "Now we move quickly but carefully," Dr. Rivera replied. "I'll return tomorrow with a small team of specialists, a structural engineer to assess stability, a preservation expert, and a cultural anthropologist with expertise in indigenous consultation. We'll need to establish proper access protocols and begin systematic documentation." The following morning arrived with an unexpected development. Emma awoke to the sound of vehicles on her driveway, not Dr. Rivera's team as planned, but 2. County Water Authority trucks and a black Westridge SUV. From her bedroom window, she watched as officials in khaki uniforms consulted clipboards while Samantha Holloway Reed directed their attention toward the eastern property line. Emma dressed quickly, her mind racing. They couldn't possibly have the legal authority for an inspection without her consent, unless the county board had fast-tracked the water restrictions Samantha had mentioned yesterday. She grabbed her phone, relieved to find a text from Dr. Rivera sent 30 minutes earlier. Emergency designation filed and confirmed. Temporary protection order in effect as of 6:38 a.m. Any attempt to access the site can be legally refused. Arriving with team by Tenjong. Armed with this knowledge, Emma walked out to meet the unwelcome visitors, Rex following protectively at her heels. The dog's fur stood slightly raised along his spine, his usually friendly demeanor replaced by watchful suspicion. "Miss Walker," called Harold Winters, the county water commissioner she recognized from previous drought meetings. "We're conducting emergency assessments of all properties with condemned wells in the East Valley. Routine procedure under the new Water Conservation Ordinance." "New ordinance?" Emma asked, keeping her tone neutral despite the alarm bells ringing in her head. "I wasn't aware the board had voted yet." "Emergency executive action," Samantha interjected smoothly. "Given the severity of the drought, Commissioner Winters has authority to implement temporary measures before the formal vote. We're just doing preliminary assessments today." Emma noted how Samantha included herself in the official activity despite having no government position. "I wasn't notified of any inspection," she said, directing her comment to Winters. "And I believe proper notice is required even under emergency protocols." The commissioner shifted uncomfortably. "Well, yes, typically, but given the urgent nature, I'll need to see the official documentation," Emma interrupted firmly, "and any inspection will need to be rescheduled for a time when my lawyer can be present." "Lawyer?" Samantha's polished veneer cracked slightly, revealing genuine surprise. "That seems unnecessarily adversarial for a routine water assessment, Emma." "Not at all," Emma replied, "just being thorough, given the value of the property and the timing of this sudden interest." She turned back to Winters. "I'm happy to comply with legitimate county requirements, Commissioner. Just provide the proper documentation and we'll arrange a time that works for all parties." Winters glanced at Samantha, clearly looking for direction. The subtle power dynamic confirmed Emma's suspicions about who was really driving this unexpected visit. "Perhaps we've gotten off on the wrong foot," Samantha said, recalibrating her approach. "We're simply concerned about groundwater contamination from abandoned wells. Several properties in the area have shown concerning test results. Given your family's long history here, we thought you'd want to be proactive about potential environmental issues." "I appreciate the concern," Emma responded, "but any inspection will need to follow proper protocols. I'll expect official notification, with at least 48 hours notice, as required by county regulations." She gestured toward the driveway. "Until then, I'll have to ask you to leave the property." For a moment, it seemed Samantha might argue further, but Winters was already retreating toward his vehicle, his discomfort with the confrontation evident. After a tense pause, Samantha followed, though not before fixing Emma with a calculating, "Look, we'll be in touch with the proper documentation," she called as she walked away. "But I should mention that properties found in violation of the new water ordinance face daily fines of up to $1,000. The East Valley assessment deadline is this Friday." Emma watched them leave, her momentary triumph giving way to renewed concern. The Holloways were clearly accelerating their timeline, using their influence with county officials to create pressure. The emergency historical designation would protect the archaeological site itself, but they could still make her financial situation untenable through fines and regulatory obstacles. She called Dr. Rivera immediately, updating him on the unexpected visit. His response was measured but concerned. "This is a classic pressure tactic," he explained. "They're trying to force action before our protections are fully implemented. The good news is that the temporary designation is already in the system. The challenge will be managing the transition period while the formal archaeological assessment is completed." "How long will that take?" Emma asked, watching the county vehicles disappear down her dusty driveway. "Ideally, 2 weeks for the preliminary work. The comprehensive study would extend much longer, of course, but the initial documentation is sufficient for permanent protected status." He paused. "The immediate concern is securing the site properly. My team and I will be there within the hour. Can you hold off any further visitors until then?" "I'll do my best," Emma promised, ending the call as she noticed dust rising from the county road, another vehicle approaching. To her relief, it wasn't more county officials, but Tyler Johnson, her closest neighbor and childhood friend. His family's organic dairy operation had weathered the drought better than most, thanks to their innovative water recycling system. Tyler had offered both practical and emotional support throughout Emma's struggles to save her farm. "Saw the county. Trucks leaving," he said as he climbed out of his battered pickup. "Thought you might need backup. What's Westridge doing with the water commissioner on a Tuesday morning?" Emma hesitated, trusting Tyler implicitly, but aware that Dr. Rivera had cautioned against sharing details widely until the proper protections were in place. "It's complicated," she said finally. "They're claiming it's about well assessments, but the timing is suspicious." Tyler's expression darkened. "They're making a move on your property, aren't they? First Anderson's place last month, now yours. They'll have the whole East Valley if they keep going." "That seems to be the plan," Emma agreed, "though I think their interest in my land specifically goes beyond simple expansion." For a moment, she considered telling Tyler everything about the underground city, her grandfather's letter, the generations of Holloway interest. But the stakes were too high, the discovery too significant to risk even unintentional disclosure. "I have some specialists coming to help me address the situation," she said instead. "People who understand how to deal with corporate pressure tactics." Tyler studied her face, clearly sensing there was more to the story. "You know I'm here if you need anything, right? Equipment, manpower, someone to run interference with the county board. Whatever it takes." His sincerity warmed her. In the midst of crisis, it was reassuring to know she wasn't completely alone. "Actually, there is something. Can you keep an eye on my place when I'm not here? Let me know if any official-looking vehicles show up, especially around the eastern boundary." "Consider it done," Tyler agreed immediately. "Dad and I work shifts at the dairy anyway. One of us is always around. We can see your east field from our hay barn." They chatted a few minutes longer about practical matters, the weather forecast, equipment Tyler could loan her if needed, the upcoming farmers market where he'd help sell some of her remaining produce. The normalcy of the conversation was grounding after the tension of the morning's confrontation. After Tyler left, Emma gathered the documents she'd need for Dr. Rivera's team, including her grandfather's letter and the property surveys showing the well location. As she organized these materials at the kitchen table, she found herself dwelling on a detail from her great-grandfather's journal. His mention of unusual cool temperature in the well, even during summer months. If the underground city maintained a consistently cool environment after all these years, there must be some form of ventilation system beyond the well opening her family had used. Understanding that system would be crucial for both preservation and security. She made a note to discuss this with Dr. Rivera's structural engineer. By mid-morning, a caravan of 3 vehicles arrived. Dr. Rivera's Jeep, followed by a university van and a truck carrying specialized equipment. As promised, he had brought a small team of experts, Dr. Meera Patel, a structural engineer specializing in historical preservation, Professor Gabriela Diaz, a cultural anthropologist with expertise in indigenous consultation, and Dr. Kai Chen, an archaeological imaging specialist whose technology could map the underground complex without extensive excavation. Emma was struck by the professionalism and efficiency with which the team operated. Within an hour, they had established a secure perimeter around the well site, disguised as an agricultural research station, complete with official-looking but vague university signage that would discourage casual observation without drawing undue attention. The temporary structures served two purposes, Dr. Rivera explained as his colleagues prepared their equipment. They conceal our actual work while establishing a visible academic presence on your property. Any attempts to interfere would now involve obstructing a documented university research project, which significantly raises the legal stakes. The team's first priority was comprehensive documentation of the underground city. Dr. Chen's ground-penetrating radar and 3D imaging equipment would create a detailed map of the complex without requiring extensive physical exploration, reducing both safety risks and potential damage to the site. "We'll start with a surface grid survey," he explained to Emma, pointing to the staked-out sections his assistant was creating around the well. "This gives us the broad footprint. Then we'll use the well access for internal imaging of the main chambers we can physically reach. The combination will provide a comprehensive model of the entire structure." While this work proceeded, Dr. Patel conducted a careful assessment of the well shaft and entry chamber, examining the construction for stability concerns. "The craftsmanship is remarkable," she told Emma as they descended together. "These stones have maintained perfect alignment despite centuries of seasonal temperature changes and groundwater fluctuations. Whoever built this understood engineering principles we often consider modern." Professor Diaz focused on the cultural aspects, meticulously photographing and cataloging the symbols and carvings Emma and Dr. Rivera had discovered the previous day. "These images will be shared with indigenous cultural experts from various traditions," she explained, "while maintaining the confidentiality of the location, of course. Their insights might help us understand who created this place and why." By late afternoon, the team had established their baseline documentation and secured the site with monitoring equipment that would detect any unauthorized access. Dr. Rivera gathered everyone in Emma's kitchen for a debriefing, spreading maps and preliminary images across the table. "Based on today's work, we can draw some initial conclusions," he began. "First, the complex is significantly larger than we estimated from the initial exploration, approximately 3 acres in total area, with multiple levels and distinct zones that appear to serve different functions." Dr. Chen indicated various colored sections on his preliminary map. The blue areas show living quarters arranged in concentric circles around what appears to be a central gathering space. The green sections seem to be storage or possibly agricultural areas. There are features consistent with irrigation systems. And these red areas, he pointed to several smaller chambers at the perimeter, show unusual heat signatures that might indicate workshops or other specialized facilities. "The construction techniques are remarkably sophisticated," Dr. Patel added. "The load-bearing calculations, the ventilation system, the water management, all show engineering knowledge that exceeds what we typically attribute to pre-Columbian North American cultures. There are similarities to some ancestral Puebloan structures, but the scale and complexity are unprecedented." Professor Diaz turned attention to the cultural elements. "The symbolic language is equally advanced. We're seeing patterns consistent with astronomical observation, agricultural cycles, and possibly governmental or social structures." Most intriguingly, some symbols bear resemblance to writing systems from cultures thousands of miles from here, suggesting trade connections or knowledge exchange we haven't previously documented. As the specialists continued sharing their findings, Emma felt a growing sense of wonder mixed with responsibility. The land her family had farmed for generations hadn't just been supporting crops. It had been protecting an archaeological treasure of immense significance. "What's our next step?" she asked when the technical discussion paused. Dr. Rivera folded his hands thoughtfully. "We've submitted the comprehensive documentation package to the State Historic Preservation Office and the Department of Interior. Based on our preliminary findings, I expect expedited review and approval of permanent protected status, likely within 7 to 10 days. "And in the meantime," Emma prompted, thinking of Westridge's accelerating pressure tactics. "In the meantime, we maintain the research presence and prepare for potential challenges," he replied. "The temporary protection order prohibits any disturbance of the site, but we should anticipate legal maneuvers from Westridge once they realize what's happening." As if on cue, Emma's phone rang, the county clerk's office. She answered on speaker so the team could hear. "Ms. Walker, this is Margaret from County Records. I'm calling to inform you that a petition has been filed regarding your property's water rights assessment. There's a hearing scheduled for tomorrow at 9 a.m. Your presence is requested but not required." Emma exchanged alarmed glances with Dr. Rivera. "Can you tell me who filed this petition?" "Westridge Agricultural Enterprises," Margaret replied. "The filing cites urgent environmental concerns regarding abandoned well structures. Commissioner Winters has expedited the hearing under the emergency drought protocols." After thanking the clerk and ending the call, Emma turned to Dr. Rivera. "They're moving faster than we anticipated. This hearing could potentially grant them access to inspect the well site." Dr. Rivera nodded gravely. "A classic end run around the historical designation, using environmental regulations to gain access despite the protection order." He pulled out his phone. "I need to call our legal team immediately. This intersection of environmental and historical preservation law is precisely why corporate interests can sometimes circumvent protections." While Dr. Rivera consulted with university lawyers, Professor Diaz approached Emma with a perspective the others hadn't mentioned. "Beyond the legal and scientific considerations," she said quietly, "there's an ethical dimension here that shouldn't be overlooked. Whatever culture created this underground city, their descendants may still exist among indigenous communities in the region. Their perspective on how this discovery is handled is not just a courtesy, it's a moral obligation." Emma appreciated this broader view of her responsibility. "How do we identify and consult with them appropriately while still maintaining site security?" "I've already initiated confidential outreach to tribal historic preservation officers from nations with historical connection to this region," Professor Diaz explained. "We share only the general characteristics of the discovery, not its location, until proper protocols are established. Their input will be crucial for both ethical management and potential legal support." By evening, a strategy for the water rights hearing had emerged. Dr. Chen's imaging revealed that the underground complex included sophisticated water management features, channels, filters, and collection systems that might still be functioning. This discovery transformed the narrative from an abandoned well requiring inspection to a historical water system deserving protection. "We'll present evidence that your well is actually part of an ancient hydrological system," Dr. Rivera explained as the team prepared to depart. "That shifts jurisdiction from county environmental regulations to federal historical preservation statutes, which our emergency designation has already activated." Emma walked the team to their vehicles, grateful for their expertise, but anxious. about the accelerating conflict. As the sun set over her drought-stricken fields, the contrast between the barren surface and the magnificent city hidden below seemed a perfect metaphor for her situation, apparent desolation concealing extraordinary potential. "We'll meet you at the county offices tomorrow morning," Dr. Rivera assured her. "Try to get some rest. This is just the beginning of what will likely be a complex process, but the significance of the discovery is on our side." After the team left, Emma sat on her porch with Rex, watching darkness settle over the farm. The knowledge that generations of her family had protected the underground city, knowingly or unknowingly, gave her renewed determination. Whatever the Holloways were planning, she would find a way to ensure the site's preservation while saving her family's legacy. Her phone chimed with an incoming text from Tyler. "Two Westridge vehicles parked at County Road Junction, watching your place. Want me to drop by again?" The surveillance wasn't surprising, but confirmed the stakes were escalating. Emma declined Tyler's offer, not wanting to draw additional attention, but his message reinforced the reality that the coming days would require constant vigilance. Inside the farmhouse, Emma reviewed her grandfather's letter again, focusing on the reference to attorney James Harrington. The name was familiar. Harrington had handled her parents' estate after their accident and had since retired. If he still had documentation about the underground city, as her grandfather claimed, that information could be crucial for the challenges ahead. Despite the late hour, Emma called Harrington's former office, now run by his daughter Melissa. The younger Harrington answered surprisingly quickly when Emma explained the situation. "I've been expecting this call for years," Melissa admitted. "Dad told me before he retired that the Walker farm held something significant. He made me promise to prioritize any inquiries from your family regarding sealed documents." "Can I access these files?" Emma asked, hope rising. "First thing tomorrow," Melissa confirmed. "Dad kept certain sensitive client materials in a special vault. I can meet you before the county hearing, 7:30 at our office." With this arranged, Emma tried to follow Dr. Rivera's advice about resting, but sleep remained elusive. Instead, she spent hours reviewing her family's historical documents, searching for additional insights about the underground city or the Holloway's interest in it. In a weathered ledger from 1937, her grandfather's early farming records, she found an entry that caught her attention. Western University archaeological team requested permission to study indigenous rock formations on East property. Denied. Access after learning of Holloway funding. Professor Williams warned privately about corporate interest in uniquely preserved artifacts, reinforced well cover, and planted additional windbreak to obscure area. This was the first evidence that the academic community had shown interest in the site decades ago, suggesting the underground city wasn't completely unknown to researchers. It also indicated that the Holloways had attempted to gain access through academic proxies when direct purchase failed, another tactical approach in their long-term strategy to acquire the site. Emma wondered how many other attempts had been made over the generations, and how many other families in the valley might be protecting similar secrets beneath their struggling farms. The drought that threatened her livelihood had also revealed a hidden history that powerful interests had worked for generations to control. As dawn approached, Emma finally dozed off in her grandfather's study chair, surrounded by the documents that connected her to a legacy far more complex than she had ever imagined. The family she had thought were simply hard-working farmers had been stewards of an extraordinary historical treasure, their seemingly ordinary lives concealing a remarkable responsibility passed down through generations. The morning arrived with clear skies and mounting tension. Emma woke to another text from Tyler, reporting increased activity at the county offices, multiple Westridge vehicles, and what appeared to be private security contractors gathering before normal business hours. The water rights hearing was clearly being treated as more significant than typical county business. After feeding Rex and securing the farm, Emma drove into town for her meeting with Melissa Harrington. The attorney's office was housed in a century-old building on Main Street, its dignified brick facade a remnant of the town's more prosperous past. Melissa was waiting outside, keys in hand. "We'll need privacy for this," she explained, leading Emma through the quiet office to a back room where a large vintage safe dominated one wall. Dad maintained old-school security for his most sensitive files. No digital copies, no cloud backups, nothing that could be remotely accessed or hacked. The combination Emma's grandfather had mentioned, Catherine's birthday followed by Jack's, opened a secondary compartment within the safe. Inside lay a sealed metal box with Walker Property Confidential engraved on its lid. Dad said this was to be given only to a Walker heir who specifically mentioned the well secret, Melissa explained, handing Emma the box. He was quite emphatic about the confidentiality. Whatever's in there, he considered it of utmost importance. Emma thanked her, promising to return the box once she'd reviewed its contents. With nearly an hour remaining before the hearing, she took the box to a quiet corner of the local diner, ordered coffee, and carefully examined the contents. Inside, she found detailed documentation her grandfather had compiled over decades. Geological surveys of the underground complex conducted discreetly through the well access. Correspondence with an anthropologist from the Smithsonian who had secretly visited in 1952, photographs of artifacts temporarily removed and then returned to the site, and most significantly, a legal brief prepared by Harrington outlining the Walker family's rights and responsibilities regarding the archaeological discovery. The brief was fascinating. It established that her great-grandfather had documented the discovery properly according to laws of the time, created a private trust to protect it, and registered this information with appropriate authorities using confidentiality provisions meant to protect indigenous burial sites. This legal groundwork, updated periodically by each generation, provided a strong foundation for Emma's current position. Most revealing was a folder containing evidence of the Holloway's methods over the years, attempted bribes of county officials. Emma arrived at the county administrative building 20 minutes before the scheduled hearing, the metal box of documents securely in her bag. The parking lot confirmed Tyler's warning. 5 Westridge vehicles were already present, along with news vans from 2 regional stations. Someone had tipped off the media, turning what should have been a routine water rights hearing into a public spectacle. Dr. Rivera and his legal team met her at the entrance, their expressions a mixture of concern and determination. Westridge has brought in their corporate counsel from the state capital, he informed her quietly. They've also filed an emergency motion to invalidate our historical designation on procedural grounds. They're moving fast, Emma observed, clutching her bag of documents, but I think we have something that will change the equation. She quickly explained the contents of Harrington's box, particularly the evidence of her family's long-standing legal protections for the site. The university lawyer, Ms. Abernathy, reviewed the documents with professional efficiency as they waited in the hallway. "This is extraordinary," she murmured. "Your grandfather established a private archaeological preserve under the Historical Sites Act of 1935. That designation predates most modern regulations and creates a complex legal precedent that will be difficult for Westridge to overcome." The hearing room was already crowded when they entered. The 5-member County Water Board sat at a raised table at the front, with Commissioner Winters prominently positioned in the center. To the right, a table of Westridge representatives included Samantha and 3 sharp-suited lawyers. Media representatives lined the back wall, while curious local farmers and townspeople filled the remaining seats. Emma took her place at the left table with Dr. Rivera and Ms. Abernathy. acutely aware of the whispers her entrance had triggered. In a small farming community, her alliance with university officials rather than local interests was already raising eyebrows. Commissioner Winters called the meeting to order promptly at 9, his usual jovial manner replaced by formal stiffness that suggested he was uncomfortable with the attention. This special session addresses an emergency petition regarding water safety concerns at the Walker property, specifically the abandoned well structure on the eastern boundary. Westridge Agricultural has requested expedited assessment under drought emergency protocols. Westridge's lead attorney, a polished older man introduced as Mr. Blackwell, presented their case first. His argument seemed straightforward. Abandoned wells posed contamination risks to the aquifer, especially those constructed before modern safety standards. The current drought created urgent circumstances justifying immediate inspection. We have documented evidence of unusual ground temperature variations and potential subsurface structural anomalies that may indicate compromised well integrity, he explained, displaying geological survey images that Emma recognized as ground penetrating. Radar outputs, likely obtained through drone surveillance of her property. These readings suggest a substantial subsurface void that could be channeling surface contaminants directly into the aquifer. The technical presentation was impressively thorough, making the well sound like an environmental disaster requiring urgent intervention. Emma noticed several board members nodding along, clearly persuaded by the scientific-sounding assessment. When it was their turn, Ms. Abernathy approached the issue from an entirely different angle. Rather than disputing the environmental concerns directly, she established the historical and legal context first. The structure in question is not an abandoned agricultural well, as Westridge has characterized it, she began. It is the protected access point to a registered historical site established under federal law. She submitted Emma's grandfather's documentation, including the original 1935 registration. The Walker family has maintained continuous stewardship of this significant archaeological resource for 4 generations in full compliance with applicable preservation statutes. The revelation created an immediate stir in the room. Commissioner Winters leaned forward, clearly surprised. What kind of historical site are we discussing? Ms. Abernathy nodded to Dr. Rivera, who stepped forward with the preliminary documentation from their site assessment. The Walker property contains an extensive pre-Columbian underground complex, essentially an ancient city, representing a previously undocumented civilization in this region. Our initial assessment confirms it as one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in North American history. Murmurs spread through the audience as Dr. Rivera displayed images of the underground chambers and intricate carvings. The State Historic Preservation Office has already granted emergency protected status to the site pending permanent designation. Any disturbance, including the kind of inspection Westridge is requesting, would potentially damage irreplaceable cultural artifacts and violate multiple federal statutes. Mr. Blackwell recovered quickly from the unexpected revelation. If such a site exists, that only heightens environmental concerns. Underground structures of unknown origin certainly warrant professional assessment by qualified environmental engineers, which Westridge is prepared to provide immediately. The legal debate intensified, with Westridge arguing that environmental protection took precedence over historical preservation in cases of potential aquifer contamination. The Water Board seemed genuinely torn, caught between competing regulatory frameworks and clearly unprepared for the revelation of an archaeological site of such significance. During a brief recess, Emma noticed Samantha in intense conversation with someone on her phone, her expression increasingly frustrated. When the hearing resumed, Westridge had adjusted their approach, now requesting a joint inspection team, including both their environmental specialists and the university's archaeological experts. This cooperative approach would address both the preservation concerns and the environmental risks, Mr. Blackwell argued smoothly. Surely we can all agree that protecting both our water resources and our historical heritage is in everyone's best interest. The proposal seemed reasonable and accommodating, which made Emma immediately suspicious. She leaned over to whisper to Ms. Abernathy, "They're still trying to get official access to the site. Once they're in, they could claim all sorts of emergency conditions requiring intervention." Ms. Abernathy nodded slightly, then stood to address the board again. "While we appreciate Westridge's apparent concern for both environmental and historical preservation, we must respectfully decline the joint inspection proposal." She paused, then delivered the decisive argument. The historical record demonstrates that Westridge, through the Holloway family, has pursued acquisition of this specific property section for over 130 years, using various regulatory and financial pressures. This pattern of interest long predates any environmental concerns. She presented the documentation from Harrington's box, including the years of correspondence showing the Holloways' persistent attempts to gain control of the site. Given this history, we cannot in good faith allow Westridge representatives access to a site they have demonstrably sought to acquire through questionable means for generations. The revelation created another stir in the room, with reporters scribbling notes and local farmers exchanging knowing glances. The Holloways' aggressive land acquisition strategies were well known in the community, but few had realized the historical depth of their interest in the Walker property specifically. Commissioner Winters looked increasingly uncomfortable, his eyes darting between the Westridge table and the attentive media representatives. "Perhaps we should table this matter for further legal review," he suggested, clearly seeking a way to postpone a difficult decision. Mr. Blackwell rose quickly. "If I may, Commissioner, in light of these unfounded allegations about our client's motives, Westridge would like to present a final perspective." To Emma's surprise, it wasn't Samantha who approached the podium, but an elderly man who had been sitting quietly in the back of the room. With assistance from a younger aide, William Holloway Sr., Samantha's grandfather and the family patriarch, made his way slowly to address the board. The room fell silent as the 87-year-old former state senator adjusted the microphone. Despite his age, his voice carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "I had hoped to address this matter privately, but circumstances require public clarification," he began. "My family's interest in the Walker property dates back to my grandfather's time. That much is true. What has been mischaracterized is the nature of that interest." He gestured to an aide who distributed folders to the board members. "These documents establish the historical context. In 1888, my grandfather James Holloway was approached by Professor William Thompson of Eastern University regarding unusual artifacts discovered in Clearwater Valley. Thompson had identified what he believed was an underground structure of significant archaeological value. Emma exchanged startled glances with Dr. Rivera. This version contradicted her family's records, suggesting the Holloways had been responding to an archaeological discovery rather than pursuing it. My grandfather, recognizing the historical importance, attempted to purchase the properties in question to protect them from agricultural development that was destroying many historical sites in that era, Holloway continued. When those purchases proved impossible, he established conservation easements and regulatory protections, mischaracterized today as pressure tactics, to prevent destruction of the sites. He fixed Emma with a steady gaze. the Walker family, has indeed been stewards of one such site, whether they fully understood its significance or not. But their conventional farming practices, deep tilling, chemical application, heavy equipment operation, pose ongoing risks to the preservation of what lies beneath. The current drought has exacerbated these risks by altering soil density and subsurface pressure dynamics. The reframing was masterful, transforming the Holloways from aggressive land grabbers to historical preservationists constrained by private landowner resistance. Emma could see several board members nodding thoughtfully, persuaded by the elderly statesman's version of events. Westridge's current interest is consistent with my family's historical commitment, Holloway concluded. We seek not ownership, but proper preservation of a cultural heritage that transcends private property considerations. Our proposed heritage conservation initiative would maintain the Walker family's surface rights while ensuring proper management of the archaeological resources below, with fair compensation for access and research rights. The proposal was both reasonable sounding and carefully crafted to appeal to multiple interests: preservation, research access, and financial compensation for the struggling Walker farm. If Emma rejected it, she would appear obstructionist and self-interested. During the brief consultation period that followed, Dr. Rivera pulled Emma aside. "This is a sophisticated play," he murmured. "They're attempting to position themselves as preservation partners rather than acquisition threats. It fundamentally changes the narrative and puts us on the defensive." "But it contradicts the historical record," Emma objected, gesturing to her grandfather's documents. "In these situations, competing historical narratives often come down to whose version the decision-makers find more credible," Ms. Abernathy explained quietly. "The Holloway family has substantial social and political capital in this community." Emma thought quickly, recognizing the strategic pivot required. When the hearing resumed, she requested permission to offer a direct response to Mr. Holloway's proposal. Standing before the board, Emma felt the weight of generations, both of her farming family and the ancient civilization whose legacy she now protected. "Mr. Holloway presents an interesting historical interpretation that differs significantly from my family's records," she began. "Rather than debate which version is more accurate, I'd like to focus on a point of agreement. The archaeological site beneath my farm is of extraordinary significance and deserves proper preservation." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Where we differ is in the approach to that preservation. The Holloway proposal assumes that private agricultural ownership is incompatible with archaeological stewardship. My family's 4 generations of protection suggest otherwise." Emma presented her alternative: a formal preservation partnership with the State University's Archaeology Department, establishing a research field station on the property that would ensure proper scientific documentation while maintaining the Walker family's agricultural operations. "The surface and what lies beneath have coexisted for centuries," she explained. "Modern preservation techniques allow this balanced approach to continue, with appropriate protections for both the archaeological treasures and the living agricultural heritage that has sustained this community for generations." Her proposal included sustainable farming adaptations that would protect the underground structures while allowing continued agricultural use, addressing the environmental concerns while respecting the historical significance of both the archaeological site and the farming tradition it had supported. "I propose a third path," Emma concluded. "Neither private corporate management nor conventional farming, but a living heritage approach that honors both the ancient civilization below and the agricultural stewardship above. The drought that revealed this underground city needn't force a choice between preservation and production. We can achieve both through thoughtful collaboration." The room fell silent, as her words settled. Even Samantha appeared taken aback by the comprehensive alternative that effectively neutralized Westridge's reframed narrative while offering a constructive path forward. Commissioner Winters cleared his throat, clearly sensing the shift in momentum. These are complex matters requiring careful consideration of multiple regulatory frameworks, he said, his bureaucratic language barely concealing his relief at finding a diplomatic exit. I move that we table the emergency assessment request and establish a joint working group to evaluate both proposals in coordination with appropriate state and federal agencies. The motion passed unanimously, effectively postponing any immediate decision while creating a structured process for further evaluation. It wasn't a complete victory for either side, but it provided breathing room for Emma's preservation partnership to take shape while preventing Westridge from gaining immediate access to the site. As the hearing adjourned, reporters surged forward, eager for comments about the underground city revelation. Dr. Rivera skillfully managed the media interest, emphasizing the preliminary nature of their findings, while confirming the site's significant archaeological value. Emma remained largely silent, redirecting questions about specific features to the university team, while emphasizing her family's commitment to responsible stewardship. William Holloway Sr. approached her as the crowd dispersed, moving slowly, with his walker but maintaining the dignified bearing that had influenced state politics for decades. Up close, Emma could see the intelligence still sharp in his eyes, despite his frail physical condition. "You've handled this well, Ms. Walker," he said quietly. "Better than I anticipated." "Thank you," Emma replied cautiously. "Though I suspect we have fundamentally different perspectives on what should happen next." The old man smiled slightly. "Perhaps, but we share an appreciation for the significance of what lies beneath your fields. That's not insignificant." He glanced toward Samantha, who was watching their interaction with poorly concealed concern. "My granddaughter represents the corporate approach our family has adopted in recent decades. I represent an older tradition, one that recognizes value beyond quarterly returns. Yet your family has pursued my property consistently for generations," Emma observed. "With varying motivations and methods," Holloway acknowledged. "The archaeological significance was always the primary interest, though the proposed management approaches have evolved with the times." He studied her face thoughtfully. "Your proposal today suggests you might be more pragmatic than your grandfather. He rejected any collaboration outright." "Different times require different solutions," Emma replied. "But the core principle remains the same: responsible stewardship that respects both the past and the future." The old man nodded slowly. "We'll speak again, Ms. Walker. The working group will provide that opportunity." With a slight nod, he allowed his aide to guide him toward the exit, leaving Emma with the distinct impression that the Holloway family's interest in her property was more complex than simple corporate acquisition. Outside the county building, Dr. Rivera's team gathered for a quick assessment. "That went as well as could be expected," Ms. Abernathy concluded. "The working group format gives us time to strengthen our legal position while continuing the scientific documentation." "Holloway's intervention was unexpected," Dr. Rivera added. "He essentially confirmed the site's significance from their perspective, which validates our preservation arguments while complicating their acquisition strategy." Emma listened to their analysis, her mind already racing ahead to practical considerations. What happens next with the research and protection of the site? The emergency designation remains in effect, prohibiting any disturbance, Dr. Rivera explained. "We'll accelerate the documentation process to support permanent protected status. My team can establish the field station within the week, providing both research continuity and visible site security." "And my farm operations?" Emma asked. The archaeological discovery might save the property from foreclosure, but she remained committed to continuing her family's agricultural tradition. Professor Diaz, who had been quietly observing the proceedings, offered a perspective the others hadn't mentioned. Traditional indigenous farming practices often evolved specifically to protect underground structures and water systems. There may be approaches that not only coexist with the archaeological site, but actively benefit from its design. This integrated vision resonated with Emma, the idea that the ancient civilization and modern farming might exist in symbiotic relationship rather than competition. It connected with something her grandfather had written about farming in harmony with the land's hidden patterns. The group dispersed with clear next steps. The university team would continue their documentation and preliminary mapping. Emma would work with Ms. Abernathy to formalize the preservation partnership, and Professor Diaz would coordinate consultations with indigenous representatives to ensure culturally appropriate protocols. As Emma drove back to her farm, she found herself reflecting on the day's revelations. The underground city her family had unknowingly protected for generations represented not just an archaeological treasure, but a fundamentally different relationship with the land, one where human habitation was integrated into natural systems rather than imposed upon them. The drought that had threatened her farm's survival had revealed an ancient civilization that had apparently thrived through sustainable adaptation to the region's conditions. Perhaps their underground city hadn't been built as a response to crisis, but as a deliberate harmonization with the environment, using the Earth's natural cooling properties, the stability of limestone formations, and the protection from seasonal extremes. Back at the farm, Emma found Tyler waiting by her gate, his expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Heard the news from folks leaving the hearing," he said as she parked. "An entire underground city, under your east field all this time." Emma nodded, suddenly aware of how quickly the discovery would transform not just her farm, but the entire community's understanding of its history. "It's still being assessed, but yes, that's the essence of it." Tyler whistled low. "No wonder. Westridge has been so determined to buy this place. And your family knew all along." "My grandfather did," Emma clarified. "He was protecting it, not exploiting it." "Classic Jack Walker," Tyler said with genuine respect, "always taking the long view." He gestured toward the eastern boundary. "Your university friends are already setting up over there. Quite the operation." Emma looked where he indicated, seeing additional vehicles and equipment being positioned around the well site. Dr. Chen's team was establishing the permanent monitoring system they had discussed, creating both scientific infrastructure and visible security. "It's going to change everything, isn't it?" Tyler asked quietly. "For your farm, for the valley." "Yes," Emma acknowledged, "but change was coming anyway, with or without this discovery. The drought, the corporate acquisitions, the economic pressures, we were already at a turning point. This just gives us more options for what comes next." As the sun began its descent toward the western hills, casting long shadows across her struggling fields, Emma felt a strange sense of connection to both her farming ancestors and the unknown civilization that had created the underground city. Both had found ways to adapt to challenging conditions, to preserve what mattered most while evolving their relationship with the land. The drought that had threatened everything she valued had ultimately revealed something far more precious than water, a new understanding of what it meant to belong to this particular piece of earth, to be not just its owner, but its steward, protecting legacies both visible and hidden. In the weeks that followed, Emma's farm transformed into a hub of carefully managed activity. The university established a proper research center at the eastern boundary, complete with preservation protocols and security systems. The field stations Presence deterred further Westridge pressure tactics, while providing Emma with consulting income that addressed her immediate financial challenges. The working group process proceeded with unexpected cooperation, as William Holloway Sr. continued his personal involvement, tempering his family's corporate approach. His genuine interest in the archaeological significance seemed to outweigh acquisition goals, at least for the moment. Most remarkably, the research revealed that the underground city included an extensive water management system, channels, filters, and storage chambers that had once collected and purified water from the surrounding watershed. Professor Diaz's indigenous consultants helped interpret these features, recognizing them as similar to systems described in their cultural histories, but previously undocumented in physical form. With careful adaptation and modern technology, portions of this ancient system were cautiously restored to functional status, providing sustainable irrigation for Emma's fields, even as the drought continued. The agricultural methods suggested by indigenous consultants, less invasive tilling, companion planting patterns that reduced soil compression, and strategic field rotation, proved compatible with both the underground structures and modern farming needs. By harvest time, Emma's previously failing farm had become a working demonstration of integrated heritage management, producing crops above ground while protecting and studying the ancient civilization below. The approach attracted attention from agricultural sustainability experts and historical preservationists alike, creating educational opportunities that generated additional revenue streams. In a fitting symmetry, the well that had started it all became the centerpiece of a carefully designed access point to the underground city, allowing limited, controlled research visits while protecting the site's integrity. Each descent into the ancient chambers reminded Emma of that first discovery, when desperate circumstances had revealed unexpected possibilities beneath the surface. The drought eventually eased, as all weather patterns do, but its legacy remained in the transformed relationship between Emma's farm and the land it occupied. The crisis that had threatened to end her family's agricultural tradition had instead deepened and enriched it, connecting modern sustainable farming with ancient wisdom about living in balance with the Earth's systems. Standing in her east field, on the anniversary of her discovery, Emma watched researchers and indigenous knowledge keepers working together to document a water filtration system that had functioned for centuries before European contact. The stone-lined channels and natural filtering beds demonstrated engineering principles that modern systems were only beginning to replicate. Rex lay at her feet, grey around the muzzle now, but still alert to her moods. The farm's transformation had been good for him too. More people to monitor, more activity to engage his herding instincts, more purpose in his daily routines. "Ms. Walker," called Dr. Rivera, emerging from the access structure. "We've completed the mapping of the western chambers. There's something there I think you should see." Emma followed him down into the cool darkness of the underground city, now properly lit with non-invasive LED systems that protected the ancient surfaces while allowing detailed study. The temperature remained constant year-round, a feature the original builders had clearly understood and utilized. The western chamber had only recently been safely accessed, after structural reinforcement and careful debris clearing. Unlike the eastern sections with their residential features and water systems, this area contained what appeared to be agricultural experimentation spaces, stone tables with drainage systems, growing beds with different soil compositions, and wall carvings depicting planting cycles. They were developing drought-resistant cultivation methods, Dr. Rivera explained, showing Emma the systematic layout of the growing areas. Different soil amendments, water conservation techniques, seed storage systems, all designed to maintain food production during extended dry periods. Emma studied the ancient agricultural research station with a sense of profound connection. The challenges she faced as a farmer had been confronted by this civilization centuries earlier, and they had developed sophisticated responses that modern science was only beginning to rediscover. We're finding similar experimental spaces throughout the complex, Dr. Rivera continued. This wasn't just a refuge from harsh conditions, it was an innovation center developing solutions to environmental challenges. The revelation confirmed what Emma had begun to suspect. The underground city represented not a civilization's end, but its adaptation and evolution. The people who had created these chambers hadn't been fleeing disaster, but actively engaging with changing conditions, developing sustainable approaches to climate fluctuations that modern society was struggling to address. As she climbed back to the surface, emerging into sunshine that now nourished crops planted according to patterns suggested by the ancient carvings, Emma felt a profound sense of continuity. The drought that had threatened to end her family's farming legacy had instead connected her to a much older agricultural tradition, one that had faced similar challenges and developed resilient responses that remained relevant centuries later. The ancient city beneath her fields wasn't just a historical treasure to be preserved, it was a resource of knowledge and wisdom that could inform modern responses to environmental challenges. The crops growing above ground and the chambers preserved below were not separate legacies, but interconnected aspects of humanity's ongoing relationship with this particular piece of earth. Emma walked back toward the farmhouse, where her grandfather's documents now shared space with archaeological reports and indigenous knowledge records in a growing library of integrated understanding. The crisis that had nearly cost her everything had ultimately revealed the farm's deeper value, not just as agricultural land or archaeological site, but as a place where past and present, surface and depth, crisis and innovation converged in a continuous story of human resilience. Rex trotted beside her, alert as always to the patterns of life on the farm he protected. Above them, clouds gathered on the western horizon, not threatening drought this time, but bringing the gentle autumn rains that would nourish next season's crops. The cycle continued, as it had for centuries before Emma's family arrived and would for centuries after they were gone. The underground city had survived its builders, just as the farm would outlast her stewardship. What mattered was the wisdom passed between generations, the knowledge of how to live in balance with the land's rhythms, visible and hidden, through seasons of plenty and scarcity alike. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.